HIMSS New York State Chapter Election Committee, we'd like to welcome our three candidates. Our candidates are on the ballot for president-elect for the board member position. Today, we will be hosting a debate to get to know them a little bit better. But before we begin, I'd like to just go over some rules of engagement that we'll be following. The members of the election committee here today are Yasmin Henry and Dr. Amin Hakim. They'll be asking the questions along with myself. Candidates will be allotted 2 minutes to respond to each of the questions. When you see my hand come up, that means your time is out. Please allow the next person to respond. We will do this in a round robin style for each of the questions. So we wish everybody the best and good luck. And we'll begin our session by asking our candidates to introduce themselves before we begin this debate. So Alexis, why don't you get started, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexis Ballinghongen. I am a nurse informaticist, have been in the health industry for, I'd say, over 15 years. Also received a master's degree from New York University in nursing informatics, and currently now working at Baxter as a national strategic accounts clinical advisor in that role, as an industry lead and subject matter expert. Currently, right now, I chair the diversity and also education committees at HIMSS and also attend nursing committee meetings as well. One of our goals for this year is to disseminate scholarships so that we can touch the lives of those who are in high school who may be interested in this health IT space.
Thank you, Alexis. Mark, let's hear from you, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Russo. I've been with the HIMSS chapter for going on 7 years. Currently, I work in the healthcare industry. I work for McKinsey & Company as a healthcare specialist. I've been in the healthcare industry for about 10 years, doing healthcare strategy consulting. I've been with the New York chapter, like I said, for about 7 years, and currently I'm serving as the chapter's treasurer. And over the last 2 years, we have made a number of changes to how the chapter oversees its finances, specifically implementing a number of upgrades with our accounting software, QuickBooks. We now have new budgeting tools that make it a lot easier for us to oversee expenses in terms of different events or different activities that the chapter is working on, as well as reporting those expenses up to the board. I've actually automated that part of it as well. We've also implemented new protocols to invest the chapter's funds, and that goes towards allocating funds that we have earmarked for certain events, as well as ensuring that we serve our fiduciary duties to invest those funds in money market accounts that keep up with kind of standard rates across the industry. So had a great exposure in that role, understanding how the chapter operates from a financial standpoint. In that role, I also saw a lot about how the chapter operates from a kind of process and protocol standpoint, and would love to help the chapter grow as the president-elect and expand membership and events throughout the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Tyler.
Awesome. Well, yeah, really excited to be talking to you all today. Let's see, I joined HIMSS about 13 years ago when I first got into the healthcare space. When I first graduated from college, I worked on Capitol Hill for a year. So you could say this is not my first foray into politics. And that was an interesting time because that was when they actually passed healthcare reform. And so then I realized that I didn't want to be a career politician, but I was interested in healthcare. And so then I started in the consulting side, in IT consulting, working for a company called Cumberland, and was there for a couple of years, and then broke off and actually co-founded Health Data Movers, where I'm the CEO right now. During that journey, I also got my MBA on the West Coast. So I left New York. I think I've been a member of New York HIMSS for 4 years since I got back from there. But during that time, I have been on the provider member engagement task force. So it's been a great experience. I've gotten to work with Tony. I took over once Kathy was elevated to another role within the organization. I've really gotten to see how much OA engagement can be improved. And, I think Mark talked about expanding our footprint. There are a lot of potential, areas that we can build on what we've already gotten started at New York HIMSS. And so I'm excited because the organizations within New York State HIMSS are not just big name organizations for us all as residents of New York, but also for healthcare in general across the country. And so we get to work with, the largest municipal systems like New York City Health and Hospitals, but also, centers of innovation like Memorial Sloan Kettering. So in terms of other volunteer engagements or related pursuits, I've been on the board of a company called BrainKey, or advisor at a company called BrainKey for about 5 years. They've been doing AI on brain scans, sort of like a 23andMe for your brain. It's become a lot more popular recently with the AI buzzword that seems to taking the place of NFTs or crypto, whatever you want to insert. But those are areas of innovation that I've been involved with that I'd love to bring more to the chapter, in terms of whether we're having engagements or even like webinars. And then let's see, I also volunteer in New York at Father's Heart Adult Continuing Education Center. So I think Tony does a really good example of giving back. And so while I think that there's a lot of different ways I can serve to help HIMSS, I'm excited about the potential to, run for president-elect and ideally build up some leadership skill sets while helping the chapter grow. But regardless, I'm excited to be talking with everybody here and figuring out if this is the right place where I can help and just getting to everybody better.
Thank you, Tyler. All right, let's begin with our questions. Yasmin, you want to take the first question, please?
Certainly. Thanks, Tony. So you're all members of New York State HIMSS. That's why you are running for this position. So as a member, what do you think that we're doing right? And what changes do you think will benefit the organization and why? Let me start off with Mark. You want to take this first?
Absolutely. So I think some of the successes at the chapter can be seen at some of our most recent events. About a month ago, there was the 2023 Nursing Symposium, which was led by Olga, and there was an incredible turnout, great speakers, great events all around. And I think those types of events where members have the opportunity to network, meet other members, leaders in the industry, hear from them, learn from them. I think those are the types of events that our members are looking for more of. Given COVID, we about 2 years ago, we moved to 100% remote events. And I think that we saw a lull in our membership. We started to see membership decline. So to me, that showed that our members are not getting the value that they're looking for out of their membership. And over the last 1.5 to 2 years, we've started to do more in-person events, and we've really pushed for that. And I think that our events committee, as well as our member base, have really great ideas for topics that are interesting, and many of them have kind of the energy to push those forward and create those events. So I think that there's some great successes recently, but I think what we can do better is better inspire those members and push them to come forward with those ideas, to put those events into action. We've had a number of different ideas kind of thrown around of different types of events, be it in the classroom, in the workplace setting, in the more of a social space, similar to what we do at National every year, where we host the luncheon, as well as coordinating with other chapters. So I think that we've had some great events previously, but that's really what members are looking for out of the chapter, I believe, is to meet, to learn, to grow personally and professionally, and that's one of the biggest focuses of my my campaign.
Thank you, Mark. Tyler, same question. What do you think we're doing right, and what changes do you think we would benefit the organization, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I got to piggyback off Mark's answer. I do think the events are, incredibly impactful. And I'll maybe take it even one step further. I think that, you know, I love that Alexis is an actual clinician. I think that the New York State chapter does a really good job of showing that technology and clinicians are not sitting on separate sides of the aisle, that we're actually together. And I think our events always do a really good job of having almost more clinical representation than IT. And so I think that becomes even more important because IT is not like a nice to have anymore. It is part of healthcare. And like when I first got in, like when meaningful use was started, it was like, you know, there's still this debate whether technology would last. And obviously as members of HIMSS, like we we took the other side of the bet that we knew that technology was essential. And so I think that one area that could maybe be improved even more out of the events, would maybe have some more future looking parts of how the next evolution will come about. I think we talk about the AI topics, and we had a really good that really good presentation with Bruce Eckert around the American healthcare, how it's not as bad as everybody thinks. But I'm wondering if like at our events we could open it up more to like breakout discussion sessions where we're, you know, we do have the networking hour, we have the speaker hour, but maybe there's a time where we get together in like groups where we kind of like then kind of talk about how the presentation affected us, and maybe that creates bonds that go past the event. I think the other thing that we could do is set up a little bit more I'm part of the provider member engagement task force. We have folks from other groups that join us from time to time on those meetings, but there could be better coordination of teams within New York State HIMSS, because I can't say that I've met everybody at New York State HIMSS, and a lot of that has been, if I have, it's because I've reached out to other people. So maybe better like you know, coordination across the different groups. But otherwise, yeah, to Mark's point, I think our events are really strong and it's a strength we can build upon.
Thank you, Tyler. Alexis, same question.
Thanks. So Mark and Tyler bring up some great points, but I think in my time so far sitting as a member at large director for our New York State board, and one of my passions is what we started doing was we started bringing in the voices of students, right? Students who might be at the graduate level, students who might be at the undergraduate level, or even students who are trying to obtain, let's say, a doctoral degree and they're already within their practice. So finding the voices of those students, hearing what their needs are, what can they get out of their membership as they join our chapter, and then, you know, bringing to the table those thoughts that they've have voiced to us. I think that's what we're doing right. What we can improve upon is the diversity aspect of that, right? So Ellen and I, for both education and diversity, we're aiming for a September in-person event where it's the theme for now is, you know, finding your voice in this connected world, right? How do we bring in the diversity aspects of healthcare, the diversity issues that we can have within the education process, and also the diversity within our membership, right? How can we bring more seats to the table? How can we expand that table so when we're not really acting in a siloed fashion and making sure that all their voices are heard? I think that's something that we're starting to do, and then to improve on it is to expand some of those aspects and grow a larger and you know, bigger constituency.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Great to start. Let's get into question number 2. And question number 2, what would you hope to accomplish in your first 6 months as a board member? Or how would you define success as a board member? Let's start with Tyler.
Yeah, I think in my first 6 months as a board member, what would I like to accomplish? I would like to have one-on-one conversations with, I'd like to say 50 members, and then use those conversations to figure out how I'm going to use the rest of my, I guess, year and a half in the role. I think the big part of New York State HIMSS that I've learned that the more I've been around it is a lot of people look at it in different ways. I think like we talked about events, education, but my like understanding of the chapter is still pretty limited to the individuals I've interacted with at events. And so because I'd be in a position where I'd be, supporting the president, supporting the board, I'd still could be in a kind of thesis building state, if you will. And so, yeah, I think it's just like setting myself up for the rest of the term would be through the interactions with those individuals and in-depth conversations to serve the chapter as the constituents would want it to be served.
Thank you, Tyler. Alexis, why don't you take the next slot?
Yeah, sure. So I think within the first 6 months, in terms of success, I think it's following through with some of the goals that our committees have made, is disseminating more than $10,000 worth of scholarships that were approved, by our current board. That can be disseminated to high school students, right? Education starts at that level to get them interested in health IT. And I think sometimes when we approach students who are already at a graduate level, it's too late. How do we grow that foundation for that interest, knowing that there is a clinical burden? There is let's just say it, with nursing in particular, because I am a nurse, we know that that is some of the issues that we face. So if we get students interested at an earlier stage, we can grow our membership. It follows through with our mission from a philanthropic standpoint. We're able to educate the youth about what we're all doing, and then it provides that sense of mentorship, right? And I think that's something that us leaders in this space, within this chapter, we can provide that mentorship to those who are potentially interested, and maybe tap into some knowledge and some, creativity from kids at that start.
Thank you. Mark, why don't you wrap it up and
Sure. So I think in the first 6 months, I would like to evaluate my success really on two options. I look at the role as the president as a role of guiding the chapter towards a vision, and I view that vision as something that's not just what the board of directors thinks, but really what the members think. And I think one of the first ways to get there of that shared vision is to hold a town hall, similar to what Tyler was saying, is get the feedback from members. Listen to our members on where they want to invest, where they want to put funds, what types of events they would like to have, or perhaps what other creative ideas they have for the chapter, and get that as part of the shared vision, and then create a way to evaluate not just myself, but the rest of the board members and the rest of the committees as well. Having a scorecard is something that we've talked about for our board members. It's never been implemented for a number of reasons, but getting that structure to evaluate success for our board, for our committees, and for our chapter overall, I think will be really helpful to build upon every 6 months after that, and actually grow and actually achieve the goals that we want to achieve.
thank you, Mark. All right. Next up on is Amin.
Me. All right. Hello, everyone. The next question is that you all have been active in some capacity or another within your chapter. So tell us about your work with New York State HIMSS chapter committee or task force or the like. And if there is a different committee you haven't joined, or if you haven't been on a committee per se, specifically, which one would interest you and why? So, Alexis, would you go first?
Sure. So great question. So one of my goals when I first became a member at large on the board was to actually find out about our committees. So what I asked was to be invited to those committee meetings so that I can learn about every chair or member, learn about what were their goals for these meetings, whether it was finance, whether it was programs, whether it was education. Previously, I did sit in advocacy. I was part of nursing. I chaired diversity and then started education. At some point, I was like, wait a minute, I can't be part of all. So I have to single in and hone in on what are my true passions. So for now, it's chairing education and diversity because that is, one of my true passions and goals, and it also fulfills a lot of the missions for HIMSS as an organization. As I mentioned before, we do have that scholarship aspect to the committees, but I think what I'd like to also do is grow the learning process and positions within the board per se, where I've listened to some of the feedback of our members, and from a student perspective, it's been thrown around there of, hey, how about a student rep? Not necessarily that has voting privileges, but more as like an internship as a student rep on the board so that they can learn about the board happenings. How do you conduct yourself within a board? What are the procedures? Because it is a great learning experience and curve for those who may potentially already be in the healthcare space as a clinician but want to advance and grow their career into this arena. So I think it's being very mindful and cognizant of who our members are, where they want to grow, and what do they want to get as a takeaway by being a member.
Thank you. Mark, would you go next?
Absolutely. So I became involved as a member at first with the membership committee, and the membership committee oversees kind of the chapter operation, so to speak. So anytime that you receive an email, you see a post on Facebook or Twitter, you see our website and you look at the events, all of the kind of ins and outs and communications, a lot of that falls into like the legacy, what we call the membership committee. So I was a very big part of setting up those new tools, our initial implementation onto Star Chapter, and actually formatting the tools to communicate to members. And as well as some additional tools like LinkedIn. I set up our initial LinkedIn page. We previously had a group, which was a private group. I set that up as a company page, which allows anyone to join. And LinkedIn, if you check today, we're actually about to cross the threshold of 1,000 followers, which is awesome. LinkedIn is actually one of our greatest outlets for communicating news and events for our members. So I started there, got a sense for where to meet members and communicate with them, and then from there I got more involved as the chapter treasurer. As I mentioned, I've been the treasurer for roughly the last 2 years or so. When I took over that role, we did not have any kind of formal reports on how chapter finances are reported at board meetings or how budgets are set each fiscal year. And at this point now, we have very strict protocols in terms of how budgets are allocated per line item for each event, how they're reviewed and approved by the board, and also how our budgeting is done within QuickBooks. Previously, it was manual on Excel files. Now we have an automated system that we can build off of each fiscal year and adjust kind of the dials in terms of where we want to put more or less. So taking that kind of structure and would love to apply that to the new role.
Thank you. Tyler?
Sure, yeah. So I've been on the provider member engagement task force, I want to say for going on around 6 months at this point. And I do believe that the providers are critical to our success. Care is delivered at our provider organizations, and if we do not have the involvement of members from the provider organizations, then we're essentially just kind of talking to each other about healthcare technology, and not really at the forefront, or even there's no way we can be cutting edge or involved in the tech advances in technology. So in the president-elect role, I'd use the increase in title and the increase in kind of gravitas within the organization to drive more engagement. I mean, what I've seen is we have provider members who still are not quite aware of their HIMSS membership. And if they are, they're not aware of how they can use their HIMSS membership. We also have provider organizations that are flagships within the New York State region that are not members of HIMSS, which is another area that we need to improve. Every flagship organization in New York that has a computer, which is every organization, should be a member of HIMSS. And so those are areas that I've gotten exposure to. And I understand it's not easy. I think what I also know from being on the vendor side in my career is that any type of interactions with providers are always going to be limited and require effort. The nice part is we are in a volunteer organization, and we are essentially a trade group that has interests that are aligned, but it doesn't mean that everybody will just pick up our calls. So all that being said, is seeing that it's not essentially just a walk in the park has also taught me that there are a lot of things that we can do that will be positive. And I got to say goodbye, Charlie. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Right. I think
Jasmine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's great to hear you've all been committee members. So in your mind, what do you think the difference is between a committee chair and a board member, taking into consideration things like authority, influence, or obligation? Let's start with Mark.
Yeah, so having been part of a committee as well as the board member, one of the biggest differences that I see is really the role, the responsibility of a board member is more focused on advising and the organization towards certain goals. So the committee members are kind of like the worker bees. When I was on the membership committee, I was the one typing the emails or sending the Twitters and reporting out those numbers. And the board was advising me on what some of our goals were around that. But as far as implementing, it's the committees that have that creativity and that kind of width to go out and execute on what those goals are. It's the board to help set those goals and provide direction on where we want to take the chapter. So I think those are some of the major differences. But having seen both sides, I would really enjoy kind of leveraging some of that experience in the role of a board member, or continuing to leverage.
Thank you. Tyler.
Yeah, so I have not served on the HIMSS board, but I did form the board for our company, Health Data Movers, and as the CEO, I set the meetings. We have 4 meetings a year in person. To Mark's point, they're strategic, and you kind of start to see the difference around vision crafting and keeping the organization headed in the right direction, as opposed to the in the weeds work. So having run those, structured the agendas, created the follow-ups, ensure that those meetings are accomplishing their objectives, I'm quite confident that in this capacity, I would be contributing from the very beginning, understanding board decorum and what the ultimate aims and objectives are of board meeting. And it would actually be kind of nice to not have it right now. All the board meetings I'm on, everything kind of rests on my shoulders. And while I would obviously take on the weight of a lot of the tasks, it'd be kind of nice to be a member of a board as opposed to being what everybody's looking at for in the president-elect capacity. And then I know eventually, owning it all, but kind of nice to be sitting in a different seat for once in the board meetings.
Thank you. Alexis, want to wrap up this question?
Sure, absolutely. So I think the major differences between sitting on the board and then sitting as the chair for a committee is that the board members are there to kind of set the rules of engagement, set the operational procedures of the chapter, oversee what will be some of the roadmaps and goals for the chapter as a whole. And then the committee chairs are there to be the liaison for the members. What are their thoughts? What are their needs? What are their questions? What are their asks? And then should the committees say, we're at a roadblock, we can bring it up to the boards to have some guidance and to take it from there so that there are checks and balances between committees and board members. But I think for the most part, being chair of a committee, there is that free reign and room for inspiration where as the committee, you can also have within your committee what were your own mini milestones and goals to achieve. So I think, to me, that's the major difference.
Thank you. Tom, back to you.
Okay, here we go. Next question. Everybody typically tells about a good decision that had pleasant results. Instead, please share with us a decision that turned out poorly for you or your organization and what lessons were learned. Tyler, why don't we start with you?
Oh. Well, I have a list of decisions I could say that have turned out poorly, but I think the idea is you do always learn whenever you make a decision, as long as you're introspective and take time to look back at what the error was. I think one of the ones, well, recently is yeah, we wanted to do a town hall on the provider member engagement task force, and was really excited about it. We got alignment internally where folks had OAs that we were going to contact. We even started off with some really strong calls that Tony, you set up with Urban Health. And then I had a Stony Point call. But then what ultimately happened is we just were not getting responses. And, there was just a lack of momentum. And while in my head, the idea of this like town hall, getting all the OAs on, we get their feedback, seemed like it was, a vision I could see. In practice, once we started having the conversations, we realized that only a handful of OAs are engaging, and that to get them all on a call at the same time was gonna be really hard. But the ones that are engaged come to our events, and then they do want to help and they do want to give feedback. And so while we had like a bigger kind of playing field that we wanted to involve, what I realized was like the folks that do want to get involved in the organizations, those are the ones that we need to work with to build up and to create examples around, oh, we did this with Urban Health Plan, and then we can use that to draw in the other ways that are maybe harder to nail down. So I guess what I'd say is not the lesson I learned from pushing forward was there are ideas that will seem good to us as HIMSS committee members or HIMSS task force members that maybe we need to do a little bit more diligence with our audience, and then we can always reevaluate with the audience, because the ultimate goal is to drive engagement, and there may be a different way of driving engagement than what we think.
Thanks, Tyler. Alexis, why don't you take second spot here?
Sure. So I think to answer this question would be, not digging deeper or asking more questions. And a great example would be recently we had changed the ability for students to vote. And so for me, that was the lesson learned from that was digging deeper and asking the whys, right? So when members had asked, why couldn't I took it as my personal responsibility sitting on the board to go then discover and ask questions as to why couldn't students vote? And because of that advocacy piece, students were then very receptive. We're extremely grateful that they now have the ability to vote since they are members of our chapter and do have the ability to participate within our committees, to participate within our events. So I think that was my lesson learned, where previously I didn't dig deeper, wasn't really asking the whys as much as I could have. So I learned from that, and from that, was able to provide the voice of our members and specifically our students.
Thank you. Mark, why don't you finish up?
Sure. So I'm thinking of something, at the HIMSS chapter where we made a mistake. To answer your question, where we made a mistake was about a year ago is when our current board looked at our budget as an annual exercise and approved the budget for the following or the coming fiscal year. And as part of that, we looked at that budget and looked at some of the goals we wanted to achieve. One of those goals was that we wanted to grow membership in multiple area in all corners of the state. So upstate, Western New York City, Hudson Valley. And we kind of looked at this and said, well, it's the board's responsibility to set funding for that, and then the committees will execute on those events. So we actually set a goal of a budget of up to $5,000 for an event in each one of those cities. And now we are almost a year from that decision, and for a number of reasons, we only executed on one event in the Buffalo area, where we had a very low turnout as far as our events regularly go. And I think this was, in good faith, the board was trying to do the right thing of setting aside these funds and earmarking them for a certain purpose to achieve our goals. But I think there was a failure to understand the organizational capacity to actually hold those events and engage our members. And I think this, at its core, is the biggest opportunity for our chapter to grow. It's how do we provide value to members, and making a decision to say, oh, here's $5,000 to go put on an event. That's not going to necessarily track to providing more values to our members. I think that if we're able to actually engage those members, we'll see more people coming to our events. We'll see more people engaged in voting. We'll see more organizational affiliates. We'll see more students. We'll see more clinicians all over the map. But until we can kind of crack that problem of engaging those members, I think that's where we really need to focus. And it was definitely a big lesson learned for me.
Thank you, Mark. Amin, next question is all yours.
Thank you. So you all have ideas that, the first 6 months and that sort of thing. But how do you convince others of such an idea or a concept or a design, an event proposal, or a budget change or a bylaws change? And what if others on the board disagree in spite of your best efforts? We'll start with you, Alexis.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing we should also focus on is being a board member doesn't mean everyone agrees on everything. Otherwise, what's the point of having a board, right? Change happens when there are disagreements, when there's conflicts, but it's really in how you manage those conflicts. And I think that starts with governance, bylaws, rules of engagement, operational rules. So I think that's kind of where we should focus on in terms of convincing. I think you start with the facts, right? The legalities and things and how everything was written in order for us to have those rules and engagement in place. Now, convincing people that you want to be successful in what you're trying to, follow through with, I think it's really just asking questions, right? Digging deep into, if someone is disagreeing with you, listen to them in terms of, What is their opinion? Why are they disagreeing with you? And then if you can provide an alternative or at least a compromise, I think that's where we start to, be effective in terms of change management. So absolutely, there can be disagreements. You may not always say yes to everything, but that's also then an opportunity to say, if I'm told no, then I'll come back with another solution or proposal for the next time. Just because no was said the first time doesn't mean no is going to be said the second time. You might get a yes from them.
All right, thank you. Mark?
Sure. So I'd like to bring up kind of an example of, in my role, how I've really tried to accomplish what you're saying of convincing other board members and making decisions. I think that is a crucial component of being a board member, is participating, providing your opinion, and supporting the board make those decisions. And I think the responsibility of each board member is to clearly communicate those issues or questions that you're bringing up, and the benefits and the risks that those have to the chapter. So, for example, as the treasurer, I created a template to look at our budget for events, and that looked at all of the revenue that we were expecting from sponsors or selling event tickets, all of the expenses, the catering, the fee for the rental venue, and then the profits. And that is one piece of the benefits that we would be expecting from those events, but also just the value that those events are providing to our members. So another piece. So kind of looking at those events holistically, not just from a financial perspective, but from member value perspective and what we're actually delivering on our commitment to the members. And I feel strongly that it's the board members' responsibility to communicate all of those pieces of information, the benefits, the risks, the trade-offs of all these decisions, no matter what the situation, to help the board actually make the decision. So like Alexis said, not everyone will agree on these decisions, but my role would be to communicate all of these different pieces of the decision so that everyone can make an informed decision. And communicating that, I think, is how I'll be successful in the role.
Thank you, and right on time. Tyler, you're next.
Sure. So I think everything that Alexis and Mark said is pretty spot on. I think the key to most situations in life, it's around the relationships. And so, I think that any contentious debate that comes out of surprises is typically unnecessary, because there's probably time where one-on-one conversations could have been had prior. It doesn't mean that all information needs to be disclosed, but there's probably a way to start building consensus before a big board discussion, so that people actually have time to think through the different options, like Alexis was saying. And then communicating clearly is essential. And one of the things I've learned through company building in general, most of the time people are more aligned than they think they are. The issue is just that sometimes some folks communicate too much, which then drowns out what they're actually trying to say, and some folks communicate too little. So it's finding that healthy balance. But I think that comes out of the relationship, because the more you know your audience and the more you know who you're working with, the better you are able to calibrate around those conversations. So it's a mixture, it's a balance. It's kind of exercising strong EQ while also having empathy for the other person or people you are working to gain consensus with.
Thank you. Yasmin, I think the next question is yours.
You're on mute, Yasmin.
My apologies. So, Tyler, you just mentioned something about time, and time is something I'm sure you'll all agree we never have enough of. The demands from your various organizations that you are part of, and in your case, Tyler, you are the CEO of your organization. The demands on your time have caused you to miss 2 consecutive board meetings. what should you do? Let's start with Mark.
Absolutely. So I think that goes back to my point of what we expect out of each board member. I think making the time available is a non-negotiable. So missing a board meeting, missing one board meeting because of an emergency, I think is acceptable. But missing more than one board meeting when we're only meeting on a monthly basis, in my eyes, is unacceptable. I think that those meetings are very important. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing for them, and important decisions that are made, and discussions that really only come up during those meetings. So I think it really needs to be a priority to attend as many of those meetings as possible, and missing two seems a bit too much. One of the things that I've seen in my role as the treasurer, when you bring up time, that I want to mention as well, is that I think there's a lot of things that our chapter can do to become more efficient and better manage our time. When I first took on the role of treasurer, each board update started out with a blank Word document, updating an Excel file, and then it moved to kind of just incrementally updating that Excel file each month. And then it moved to automating the budget reporting process in QuickBooks, where I actually don't spend any time now communicating financials to our board. Our board now receives an automated report that's exported from QuickBooks after each month. So I think setting up the right tools to really manage your time and committing to the board, being present for those meetings, and if you can't be present, making sure that you have a proxy or someone to communicate your ideas if that event rolls up.
Thank you. Thank you. Tyler, same question.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Mark, although having not been on the board, I'll reserve judgment. I do think missing 2 meetings is probably an area where the board member maybe reconsiders if it's the right fit. But if we want to hypothetically say there's been extraneous circumstances that necessitated the missing, then I think right. I don't think it's your responsibility to know the meetings that you missed almost better than anyone who was in the room, and whether that's through listening to the transcript, rereading the minutes, and then having conversations with folks who are in the room to get the best picture. Because the last thing you ever should be doing in that situation is making anybody repeat themselves for you. And then, yeah, I think that any ways that meetings can be documented really effectively, and information can be disseminated prior, that's not, something that needs people's, if it's just for informational purposes and it's not for discussion or driving a conversation forward, then yeah, that's definitely effective. But I think I'll go back to, in closing, just saying, there's a commitment, and everybody else has made the commitment. And if you can't uphold your end of the bargain, then it's probably an opportunity to maybe gracefully depart.
Thank you, Tyler. Alexis, same question.
Sure. So I like to go on the other end of the spectrum before I make assumptions that it's time for someone to depart from the board, or they're not committed to the board because they missed 2 meetings. First, I would take a pause and ask them, why is it that you've missed 2 consecutive meetings? If it's not a time that is appropriate for your work, because this is a voluntary position, right? We do have other commitments, even though we did make a commitment to be part of this board. But if we can be inclusive of other circumstances that another board member may have, I think we should take a pause and say, is there something we can do collectively as a whole, as a board, to potentially move our board meetings first, so that we can accommodate maybe some of those changes that may have happened where that particular board member can no longer commit to that time period? right? And yes, things can happen, but then I think I'd also defer to what are our rules of engagement, right? Like if committees have rules that states if you miss X number of meetings or you haven't participated a certain percentage, then I think those rules should also be followed for our board members as well. So I think having clear lines of engagement and participatory rules for those members are important. But I think it's also taking the time to listen to that board member. What is going on so that we can potentially help you, so that we don't potentially lose a very good board member just because they weren't able to attend 2 meetings. Maybe we can work together and actually listen and make things work for everyone.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to you, Tony.
Terrific. Thank you, Yasmin. So here you are now, you become aware of a situation at the board level that may cause a fellow board member to lose their seat on the board. What do you do and why? Why don't we start with Tyler?
Well, I think giving folks the benefit of the doubt is essential, especially in a situation that could prove to be contentious. And I think you know it's the golden rule. You always want to you know give as much attention to kind of the empathetic components before rushing to judgment. You know, at the same time, kind of what Alexis was saying, if we have guidelines and we've got we are yeah,
Tyler, we're losing you.
blatantly don't follow them. So, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're coming back clear now.
Okay, so yeah, so I'll just wrap it up by saying, you know, we follow the guidelines, you act with respect, but if someone has broken a rule or you know done something that we find in violation of chapter policy, then you have to figure out a way to
Yeah. We're losing you, Tyler. So I'm going to go to Alexis to answer give her answer.
Sure. So it goes back to, the rules of engagement and our policies, but I think it's also important to, have checks and balances in place. If someone has the potential to lose their seat, it shouldn't be the sole decision of one person. It should be explored by everyone as a board. And if there still can't be a decision, that's when you then take it up with HIMSS National. At the end of the day, we're a state chapter. There is an overarching governing body, which is HIMSS National, that will oversee all the chapters within the HIMSS organization. So I think it's having that understanding of what have we done locally as a chapter, and if we can't come to a decision after exploring what has happened and coming to a decision with that given board member, then it's time to take it to national and see what they have to say so that there are checks and balances in place.
Thank you. Mark?
Yep. So I think in this event, and we don't have all of the details, but I think in any event that's like this, where there's even a possibility that a board member would be removed for some sort of action, I think personally, I approach this first with respect for the person and confidentiality. Whenever there's a question of if someone might be removed or if they're not removed, like we said, it's not the decision of the individual, but I think HIMSS National would probably be involved in this. And I think ultimately, if that decision needs to be made, it must be made. I think that the board as a whole and the organization needs to have zero tolerance for these types of issues when they're real issues. So, I think initially just approaching it with respect to the person and fully understanding the situation. And then once that kind of gets vetted out, making the decision that needs to be made.
Thank you, Mark.
All right.
Amin, you got the next question?
Yes, and the next question is a yes/no answer. So so it should be an easy one. Okay, and we'll start with you, Alexis. Have you observed prejudice, bias, or non-compliance on a board, whether it's the New York State HIMSS chapter or some other board?
I'd say
Yes,
yes.
no. So that was a yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Mark.
Yes.
Okay. Tyler.
No.
Okay. Thank you. Yasmin, you're next.
So we're leaving sort of a ending on a positive note with your last question. So what has been your best contribution in your career, and how can that help you in this position? And we'll start with Mark.
Sure. I think one of my best contributions in my career was working with a client on a very large implementation project. It was a 2+ year project, and getting to certain milestones was really exciting and personally just very rewarding. And I think looking back on that, and thinking through the time and effort that went into getting there from day 1 to day 500, it's a lot of kind of small wins, a lot of incremental steps of progress that day by day might not feel like a lot, but over a month or 2 months, you can kind of measurably see the progress and build that momentum. And I think that's something that I've seen some of that in the chapter as well, where our board meets once a month. Many of our chapter committees meet once a month, or perhaps more often. We have events 2 times a month or so, and we kind of see a lot of that incremental progress. And I think one of my main goals as a president is to really grow our chapter, not just in headcount, but in terms of the value that we deliver to our members. And I probably would not see that day to day, especially in the beginning. But I think over time, like I said, in the first 6 months, holding a town hall, really listening to our members and what they want out of this, and then building a framework to kind of evaluate our board, our committees, and our members to hold each other accountable to achieve those goals. My goal would be in a year or 2 years from now, look back and be really excited about the progress that we're making.
Thank you so much. Tyler, you're up. Tyler, did we lose you altogether? I know you were having some issues with audio. Okay, while we're waiting for Tyler, Alexis, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. I think, hoping to be elected as the first female nurse of Asian descent, new mommy, millennial, I think has been very helpful in terms of having success. It's, coming to the table, having that seat to bring in a new perspective, having that ability to influence, the youth of who may potentially want to be part of this organization, coming in with fresh ideas so that we can revitalize, our chapter, grow our membership, encourage others to join. I think that's been very, very, very helpful to my career, to be being part of this board and also chairing a number of our committees.
Thank you so much. Not sure if we got Tyler back.
Tyler, you back?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you
Can
now.
hear me?
Yes.
All right. So,
Did you hear the question, Tyler, or would you like me to repeat it?
I think I heard it. But I appreciate that. I think that in terms of my career, the thing I'm most proud of is building up health data movers, and there are a lot of ups and downs in building a company. And there's wins, there's the work you get to do with your clients. But
the thing that I'm most proud of is watching a team come together, seeing how folks begin to see the mission vision without me in the room, and then begin to work together and create the company for themselves in a lot of ways, and then find fulfillment with this organization that we started out of nothing. And it's so lucky it's in healthcare, it's in technology, so it's in a place where folks are able to be making a positive difference on the world. And so I'm very blessed that got into this industry and have been able to make an impact there. And so, while I've done less in HIMSS than either the other two candidates, I am excited about the potential to bring that type of transformational impact to HIMSS, and I think that there's a lot that New York HIMSS does really well, and there's some things we can improve. But overall, the joy of enabling others to realize their kind of capabilities and what they can do has been the most satisfying for my.
Thank you, Tyler. Well, thank you all. This concludes our debate for the president-elect for member candidates here. I'd like to personally thank each of the candidates and also our election committee folks for a great job in putting this election session together. As a reminder, voting will be open on Monday, June 12th, and it'll extend all the way to June 26th, 11:45 p.m. We will close the voting. At that time, we will announce the winner, and we will get that all set. And then those that did not win, we want to say thank you for your participation. So thank you all to our HIMSS New York State members. Be well, be safe. And if everybody can hang on a second, I'm going to stop the recording. Great job, everybody. Thank you all for your time. I know we went a little bit over the 1 hour, but 5 minutes. And so I think we did a great job. Hopefully everybody was able to get their good comments in. This recording will be put up onto the YouTube website, YouTube site for our chapter. And Bill will have it published out to all of the voting folks so they can take a look at it for both the secretarial position as well as the president-elect position. The treasurer position, as Mark knows, he's already starting to work with our new treasurer, which will be Michael Haas. Nobody decided to run against him, so he goes in unopposed. So does anybody have any questions or any comments that they'd like to throw out here at the very end?
Nope. Thank you.
Nope.
Thank
All
you
good.
guys.
Thank you so much.
I just want to
Thank you to everybody.
you guys.
Great
You're all
job.
great candidates, and it's going to be
No
a hard job for the voters.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank
Appreciate
you for
it.
your hard work.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Enjoy the weekend coming up, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thanks.